Did you? What did it want? We get
Can I ask what your turkey molds are for?
For molding the turkey.
That or butter?
Yes, my wife. She wants the turkey butter. They can get that. Because last year was trying it all over. I ended up going to home.
To get the butter molds?
Yeah, so they go
Big butter mold.
No,
it's not.
but having the mold sounds so fun.
I'm ready.
I finally changed my closet.
Metallic?
I'm pretty late, so I'm or summer this winter, whatever we do.
Well, we didn't really have fall.
Yeah, we didn't.
It was warm and
Day here and
then,
there.
yeah, it snowed.
Yeah, we're gonna start cleaning this week and then they down the street. Some of them already got to the point like winter, snow. Yeah. Not to mention bugs can come off of the entry. It's a oak tree, and here these squirrels. Okay. I'm like,
You said you told me you were going to Silver Lane.
right.
But I said, it could be stormy. You know, almost tornado storm. You couldn't hear a thing inside the house. But ringing that day, dropping that. You just hear, you just hear, what am I? She wasn't supposed to hear that, Dad, because it's like on everything, but for some reason, but I heard rabbits and you used to squirrels.
Oh, I got rabbits.
Everyone's sitting on each other's laps.
I said, well, then you just need to shut me. I can't do it. I had to call her crazy.
I wrote that part of suitcase. And I wrote that one. And then you guys. Scrub all the boards. And then I was like,
No, they should. I just, we talked about
right? Secretary and psychologist.
Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, right?
I know, right?
Tickets for Sunday, coming back. Yeah. It was morning, but it wasn't the 7:41. It was the next one.
And I didn't send that one. No, don't put the camera down. I'll tell you on too much.
And then I was gonna go to the Bears game. So I didn't
Looking at what the things that have, what the real ways go.
I was gonna switch my ticket.
Hey, did my kids die?
Damn game. So should I just? Last year.
Is this that silly thing?
Available for the audience?
Thank you.
Are there any extra copies?
Really?
I don't have any.
Do you
I
think
was
they'll
gonna
be-
pull it up.
And so they can see it, or, I don't know, I just.
I was gonna pull it up on the screen.
And they'll be able to see. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we can like zoom in on
Okay.
business.
I'll continue the trend of not hitting the button. Somebody yells at me.
I know, lots of numbers. Lots of stuff. You know, I love, and I love the big paper when you get it on the big paper.
So good evening. We are currently already in open session, coming out of closed session earlier this evening. So we are now at the portion where we are in the public hearing concerning the intent of the Board of Education to sell school fire prevention and safety bonds to the total of, is that 40,500,000? Math is not my best suit, folks. So, Mrs. Kayana,
Yes.
are you ready to discuss the bond?
Yes,
Yes.
we're ready.
Okay, we have Kevin Hyde here this evening from Steeple Nicholas, so if we have any specific questions, you can direct those towards Kevin. If you look in this large packet that I gave to everybody, included in the sheet here are actually two different figures. So later on in the agenda, we'll be talking about $12 million for working cash bonds. But within this bond repayment schedule is the $40,500,000 for working cash bonds that we have the authority to sell to deal with any of those items that are on the health, life, safety survey and the additional amendments that we have going to be submitting after tonight's meeting to the Illinois State Board of Education. So these will go towards those repairs that are listed in that 2014 survey. Does anyone have any questions regarding those?
Regarding what? I'm not sure. Data here? You're talking about?
Regarding the data, regarding the payment schedule. We're going to be reviewing the levy later on. The first payment for these bonds that will be due in fiscal year 20. We've worked into the existing tax rate, so there is no increase in the tax rate to taxpayers. It's still the $4.95 rate that the board approved last year and the year before that for taxpayers. So we were able to work that in. And when we get to the levy section of the board meeting tonight, I'll go over those specific points.
Kevin, can I put you on the spot? Can you come up to the podium here?
Justified in coming here, good work, thank you.
Can you explain to the board and to the audience what the underlying assumptions that these numbers are, such as EAV, interest rates, things like that?
Those numbers ahead.
And Kevin, just so you know, because you've given us a couple different ones, this is with the 0.5% increase in EAV.
Okay.
I've got that one in front of me now. Allison.
So the assumptions
Yes.
are that we would issue the $40.5 million here in time to catch the 2018 levy, which means by the end of February. Of course, we have to have the approvals back from ISB before that can happen, but that's kind of the built-in assumption there. The working cash fund bonds would not come until 2020. We need to retire some of the existing working cash fund bonds to make room for the additional amount that you wish to do at that point in time. Obviously, you're not going to spend all the money in one summer anyway, so it doesn't really, isn't too concerning to do that. Overall, the levies would go through the 2038 year, so they're levies from 2018 to 2038. And again, based on a 0.5% per year EAV increase estimate, we would have that tax rate of $1.06 in bonds, which would leave your tax rate exactly where it is now. And then moving forward, you'd be looking at about $1.20, give or take, depending on where interest rates do fall out by the time the bonds are issued, both now and in 2020.
And I have some additional information that we are not anticipating the need to increase the tax rate even when the rate goes up to $1.21. We're going to fit that within our existing structure because of efficiencies that we will see. We will be able to reduce the tort levy and then work that into the bond repayment. So we should still be looking at the same tax rate.
What was our increase of EAV this year?
It was only 0.77% at this point, but the assessor does not have all the information into the county at this time.
But that's more than 0.5.
Right, correct. So we wanted to be very conservative in our estimates.
Yes, so if the EAV goes up anything more than 0.5%, then the tax rate would be adjusted downward accordingly. So we did ask for a conservative, very conservative growth estimate on here. You know, we've done a flat, but we realized that's almost dishonest the other way. So we're trying to be overly conservative to the growth side, with, you know, the understanding that typically, you know, the EAV is going up at least 2% a year. This year is an anomaly, but that's why we just see the 0.5%, which is the fourth number from the left when you look at that. Now that's projecting 0.5% increase going forward for 20 years. And what type of interest rate are you experiencing on these right now, Kevin?
Our estimates are pretty conservative right now, given that the market is trending to be a little bit higher. But in terms of an all-in total interest cost on the first issue, we have 4.7%. And in the issue in 2020, we have 4.85%. Again, just trying to leave some wiggling room there because 2020 is a good little ways off. And we know the Fed's still likely to raise at least a couple more times.
So until we actually sell the bonds, we wouldn't know what the rates are, but this is a projection based on.
These are hopefully fairly conservative numbers in that regard.
The fact that our bond rating has improved should result in a lower interest rate, but we wanted once again to do a conservative estimate, so you know, anything can happen, but we wouldn't think it would be higher than this.
Right, exactly. Hopefully the high side number.
Do you know what our bond rating is?
It's a AA minus.
Mm-hmm. But our, oh, I'm sorry. Our financial profile score did increase from last year, so we'll be getting a reevaluation from Standard & Poor's.
How often is that getting reevaluated?
Yearly. They base it off your annual financial report.
They look at it every year. They don't necessarily make an adjustment to it every year.
Correct.
if nothing, if they don't think anything's going to change, they just leave it alone.
Right, but it is evaluated every year.
Yeah.
So for the benefit of the gallery and the public watching, would either Mrs. Ham or Dr. Asplin like to explain why we are estimating conservatively?
Well, I think it's always a good idea to show you what possibly the worst case scenario is, so that if it comes in better, we have room to maneuver. So what we're trying to do is show how we can keep the tax rate stable given low EAV projections and higher than what we think they might be interest rates. Trying to stay in a reasonable range. I mean, we're not showing something that's not possible. But we feel like it's better to plan this way, so if it turns out better than what you planned for, you have money left over. You don't want to make projections on rosy predictions and then you can't live up to them, and all of a sudden you have to make different decisions. So it's always better to plan on the high side, and then you can back off of that rather than trying to sell something on the low side and then having to make up for it somewhere else so that we can't live up to our promises.
Thank you.
So it's a public hearing. Does the public need the same thing? or-
They have an opportunity to ask questions.
This is an opportunity for the public to ask questions because this is a public hearing. Are there any questions from? Okay. All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn from the public hearing concerning the intent of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Allison?
Glasnovich?
Yes.
Lyon?
Yes.
Pickrell?
Aye.
Sherpy?
Aye.
Statham?
Aye.
Thanks. Cervantes?
Aye. Okay, do I have a motion to go back into open session for the regular board meeting of Community District School, Community Unit School District 205?
So moved.
Second.
Lyon?
Oh, yes.
Pickrell?
Here.
Sherpy?
Here.
Statham?
Aye.
Thanks. Cervantes?
Here.
Glasnovich?
Yes.
Okay, if we can all stand for a moment of silence and pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now is the time of the meeting where we recognize comments from the public. We do have two individuals that would like to address the board. We request that comments are made to any items remaining to the role and function of the board. And when I direct, you can come to the podium, give your name, and begin your statement. I do want to remind the public, you no longer have to share your address. You can begin your statement. We do ask that you refrain from making any personal comments regarding any specific individual, and I do reserve the right to limit your presentation to 5 minutes. First, we have comments from Jim Jacobs.
See if we can find
I'm addressing sort of a paradox here. On the one hand, I think that Member Lyon makes a good point. In the absence of public outcry, I suppose the silence implies some agreement with what you have been attempting to do or what you're planning to do. On the other hand, I do think the Register Mail also makes a good point, and that I think it might be wise to slow it down just a tad. Having kissed those two babies, I don't think you're going to. I think there's going to be a decision made tonight. I fully expect that. So I would ask some things as a taxpayer and a former educator. First, in your quest to create a 21st century high school, don't cheat the elementary grades and don't cheat the junior high / middle school grades. Also, I think for the public, quite frankly for me, you need some kind of a definition as to what you envision a 21st century high school to be. And how does GHS North fit into that? Because if you're going to want to increase graduation rates, I think that an alternative school is essential to that goal. Once you've made your decision, which I expect to be this evening, I think it would be wise to inform the parents as to what it is that you're planning, and to not do it by simply email or Skype or whatever these electronic technical things are. I'm convinced that the best way to get important information to people remains the United States mail, or sort of a process server, I guess. So I would suggest that you draft a very clear, succinct letter to the parents and take the money. I mean, after all, you're going to be spending $40 million plus. You might as well take a little money and mail each parent a letter explaining to them what it is at this point you're planning to do. Finally, I would admonish you to remember that the quality of education is not determined by the building. It's determined by what goes on inside the building. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have comments from Dave Sharp.
Hey, good evening. I'm Dave Sharp, and I will be speaking to you tonight as a representation from the Galesburg Education Association. They have asked me to present some information to you. This came about after many of our members have contacted members of the executive committee with questions and concerns. It seems that at different meetings throughout the district and as well as through the media, some of our members have heard that there's been information out there that board members haven't been contacted, they haven't been receiving phone calls or that many emails, and they felt that it was important that you at least know what their views were on things. And so I'm here tonight to share those views with you. And this went about with putting together a survey. So what the GEA has done is given a survey to all members from kindergarten through 12th grade and asked a series of questions as to maybe they were for, against, or their views. One thing I heard as I was attending many of the meetings throughout the district was about research. And I would have to agree, yes, you can usually find research to support whatever it is claim that you're on. But I truly believe that the best research that we could possibly get here in Galesburg is from those people that work with the students that are going to be involved in this decision making as far as how it's going to affect them. And as their teachers, as experts in the areas of what they teach, of course, at grade levels and things like that, I think the research that we get from them is something that we should take into consideration. This survey that was given, we believe to be very valid. The plus minus certainty of this is approximately 5%, meaning that it could be off 5% one way or the other, but that's kind of the leeway on this survey. I do have the survey questions up here, and I would be happy to give board members a copy of that if you would like. There's approximately 4 or 5 that I'd like to share with you for the purpose of saving time. One of the questions was, do you believe that a 7th, 12th grade organization concept would be an academic benefit for students in grades 6 through 8? This was keyed in just 6 through 8. And the results were 37 yes and 63% no. Next question. Do you believe a 7th, 12th grade organization concept will be an academic benefit for the students in grades 9 through 12? 24% yes, 76% no. Next question. Do you believe a 7th, 12th grade orientation concept will be an academic benefit for the teachers / staff, the support staff for students in grades 6 through 8? Response was 35% yes, 65% no. Fourth question. Do you believe a 7th, 12th grade orientation concept will be an academic benefit for the teachers / support staff for students in grades 9 through 12? 24% yes, 76% no. I'm going to skip over some of the other ones because I want to get down to the main one. One of the questions was asked, do you believe that the district is moving too fast in their decision? And in this was answered with 70% yes and 30% no. That is kind of the gist of the results from that survey. We felt that, if anything, you needed to hear where the staff was at. We wanted not to have had an opportunity to share that with you. Some of you would like to have had that information. I know some of you asked about it and why the teachers hadn't come forward or why the GA hadn't spoken. As far as answering that question for myself, I did not want to start out with the beginning with putting any issues or roadblocks in there, comments made by outsiders or somebody not seeing the direction that the district was trying to go. I do want to leave you with this comment. Several years ago, we built the football stadium. And some of the comments that were made after that was done was, we did not have anybody contacting us about whether or not they were for or against. That was the comment. So I'm hoping that you at least take a look at the survey responses, and you can make your own judgment calls on that one. Also, I would hope that you would understand that just because you have not heard an overwhelming response in favor or against, doesn't necessarily mean that those who are not speaking up are for whatever decisions you're making. So do not look at it as a, we're with you, we're backing you on this. I would entertain any questions. I'd be happy to.
What was the end of the
pass out
survey?
surveys. The what?
What was the end? How many people participated? You gave us percentages, but you didn't give us how many people participated.
Well, I don't have the number. I will tell you that in order for a survey to be valid mathematically, you have to have a certain percentage of your population in order to make it valid. We did have what I feel is a valid percentage of the staff surveyed.
What percentage?
And I think at the present time, I believe, I could be wrong, because we're talking GA members, this only went out to the GA staff. So I have to make sure you understand that. And I believe, maybe you can help me, yeah, I think we're about somewhere between 300 and 400 on GA staff.
Over 400.
So I don't have the exact number. I will also tell you that before we put together the survey, I was being contacted by several people. So I did a one-on-one survey myself at Lombard. And at Lombard, I surveyed every 6th grade teacher, every 7th grade teacher, and every 8th grade teacher. And I only asked them one question. I didn't share any information. I just want to know one response. Do you think it's in the best interest of our students to have a 7 through 12 at the high school? And I asked 27 teachers, and 25 of those said no. They do not feel it was in the best interest of the district to have 7 through 12 at the high school. Of the 2 that said no, one said they would go either way. They were okay, whichever decision was made, they were okay with that decision. And the other one said they were for that. I did not have an opportunity to share that information. I did the same thing in Churchill because that information led to the executive committee making a decision of whether or not to put together a survey. And that's why I dropped that type of survey. I kind of just wanted the information. I mainly wanted to do that because I thought, I'm hearing people say that board members are not being contacted. I'm hearing from the press that we're not getting comments from the staff. And that's what led us to this decision to do the survey.
So is it disaggregated at all by schools, types of school?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Is the data disaggregated by the type of school?
We do have that. This information I shared with you was kindergarten through 12th grade. We covered all grade levels.
That's not
I
the
mean,
question.
if you're meaning if we could.
Was it separated, for example, do we have kindergarten, what's their view of 7?
No.
You don't have
It was given
that.
kindergarten through 12th grade. The executive committee
Everyone-
voted and decided to do that one. It was a tough decision because we were looking at the fact that it would be 6th grade, possibly up to 12th grade, and that decision thing. Affecting most of the difference would be with our 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. So I myself thought that, but the executive committee voted that we needed to survey the entire staff.
Which included all the groups in the bargaining group. So the aides were part of it, secretaries.
Yes.
And what was the percentage of people that took the survey who returned the survey?
He doesn't know.
We never did get that number.
Well, anybody that, all we have is those who have taken the survey. You wouldn't, when you go in to log into the survey, this is all confidential survey, and you would go in and you had to have a password, and you would not be able to take the survey unless you were a GA member. That was only sent to GA members.
But how many?
Right,
Okay,
but
so
what
how
we're
many
asking is how many
responses were there?
completed it.
I don't have that information in front of me. I don't have that. My understanding is somewhere between 100 to 200. I don't have the exact numbers. I didn't even have the survey, so I got.
Because,
I had a meeting.
you know, you understand, I mean, it makes a difference, 75% of a fourth of the people is a lot different than 75% of 3/4 of the people.
It makes a huge difference, but
Yeah.
I think it still gives you the information that if people took the time to take the survey, it was important to them to take the survey.
But then we get back to the same question that we've had, is the percentage of people giving us feedback. If I hear from 5 out of 100 people and all 5 of them say no, that's still not a majority of the 100. And that's what we're asking. So we're wanting to know how many people completed the survey.
My understanding was there was between 100 to 200 that had completed the survey, that this information was based on. And to follow up with that is, if you had very few people contacting you now you have somewhere in the area of 1 to 200. And it is actually educators who actually work with your children.
They do. I
In this
understand that.
district.
And I also understand that there's a wide body of best practice knowledge out there that our educators are also drawing off of. And so I want to know what that information is, not just their in-classroom perspective, but the best practices that they're also drawing off of to improve their teaching practices in the classroom every year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody? Any other questions?
I would appreciate copies of this,
I'd
the
so
scope
would
of
I.
the questions
I'd like to.
that you were asked, please.
More, you want those now, or you want those later?
Whenever.
Oh, I will pass those.
I
out
want a
later.
copy.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, moving to the next item would be presentation to the board, student council. I do not see a rep here tonight. Oh, she is. Oh, I just couldn't see her around. Knocked her out. Thank you.
I'm Emma Wolf. I'm the vice president on the Galesburg High School Student Council. On October 29th, we did our haunted high school where we decorate the first floor of the high school and let kids come in and get candy. We ended up with about 500 kids coming through in costume and bringing canned good donations. And then last Friday morning, we held a veterans breakfast at 6:30 in the GHS North cafeteria. And then we had our walk around the school for the veterans with the drum line. And then focusing on the next month, we are planning to do angel trees during advocacy, having them put together boxes for kids in need. We're also doing Operation Christmas Child, which is where members of student council make up a box for kids that are in need for Christmas. And we're also planning to decorate the downstairs of the high school for the holidays.
Can I ask you a question? Did you have a good turnout for the Veterans Breakfast?
Yeah, I think we had 10 or 15 more than last year, which was our first year, so it was fun.
Well, very nice.
Yep.
Thank you for doing that.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you.
Next agenda item, the approval of the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any items, any questions or anything that we'd like to remove? Allison?
Pickrell.
Aye.
Sharpie.
Aye.
Statham.
Aye.
Banks.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye.
Glasovich.
Aye.
Lyon.
Yes.
Next agenda item, focus area number 1, relevant skills that lead to employability. First on this is the administrative report on curriculum. Ms. Springer.
So I sent a copy.
Microphone turned on?
Okay, I apologize. I sent you a copy of this. I'm just going to hit the high points. We have started the Amplify pilot training. Teachers went through that. We have representatives from every elementary school. I got a little bit of initial feedback that I've included in the report for you. Several are really enjoying the product. They believe that the question and investigation skills are seeming to transfer to the nonfiction reading, which is exciting. And the students are thoroughly engaged, and the time seems to fly by in the science instruction, and they don't want to stop doing science to transition to lunch. That's a bonus, so I'm pretty excited about that.
Talk to food service, maybe that's.
So we also have the writing rubric and public speaking rubric development teams. We've met twice, all of the groups except for the 7 to 12 public speaking, which we meet tomorrow, so we'll have 2 meetings apiece. Developing curriculum continuums for public speaking so that they can see where the student lands. Maybe I'm a 2nd grader, but I really have some of the 3rd and 4th grade skills. I can see where to move and challenge myself. Same thing with writing. We have our K through 5 district curriculum leaders. That's new this year. It's a stipend position. I have 2 representatives from every elementary. And we have a meeting set up for December 4th and January 10th. You can see the team members on your sheet. We had our first district improvement team meeting, which we scheduled for 6 to 8 p.m., but those of you that were there, we actually went closer to 9 p.m. with all the school improvement meetings. But I was glad to see Steele Elementary and GHS, their school improvement teams came out and helped present. Our next meeting will be December 18th. I had the privilege to go to the Instructional Coaching, Teaching, Learning, and Coaching Conference with Jennifer Graves, Tom Hawkins, and Mindy Ritchie. Upon our return, we presented to Dr. Asplin some of our findings, and we'll present that to the board in December as well. We have interviews scheduled for the 14th and the 20th of November. And we also have a training coming locally, the University of Kansas, Dr. Jim Knight's Instructional Coaching Group. We've contracted with them. They're going to come January and February, and we're partnering with Knox to have the training in the Lincoln Room. And they're going to cater, the food service is going to cater for us. I've already got several people. I know I saw 5 people just today from Pleasant Valley that have signed up for the training, so I'm excited about that. The information just went out like last Thursday, I believe. Western Illinois University was gracious enough to put that out to all the school districts in the area, and we can have up to 100 people at our training, so I'm pretty excited about that. And we just got back from recruiting EIU, which was great. I actually got to sit down with 3 high school math teachers. I'm like, come to Galesburg. So I'll be calling them for some site visits in hopes that we can get some new recruits to Galesburg. That's all I have.
Any questions for Ms. Springer?
Well, it sounds like there's a lot going on, so that sort of addresses Jim's question about our concern for the classrooms. I think while we may be spending a lot of our own energy on building issue, I'm glad the administration is still moving forward on curricular issues.
Next up, the special education report. Dr. Michon.
My report's in there, but I just kind of want to highlight Presence Learning online testing for psychological. We have completed our first 10 online kids being tested, both with cognitive testing and academics. It's really going very well. Deb Craddy has completed, I believe, 1 or 2 IEP meetings with the online site. So we have it up and moving, and it's going great. So,
questions from the board?
I guess in the future, I don't know what all these letters stand for. Maybe you can spell out some of the acronyms on the reports, like MTSS. I'm sorry.
I can do that. Multi-tiered system of supports. I'll spell them out.
Thank you.
Next, do board members have any questions about building reports submitted by the school principals? Okay. Next agenda item, focus area number 2, facilities that assist in skill acquisition. Do I have a motion for the first, for, what is that? 8A. I'm so bad. Okay.
Well, what are we moving to consider?
You have to get there.
Oh, to consider.
There, right, consider approval. We got a motion from Ron, we got a second.
I second.
Okay. Questions, comments, conversation, go.
Well, if it's okay with you, I'd like to put a few pieces of information out there so everybody has the same information. I guess the first thing that's most important for anybody that's watching at home or is in the audience right now, if the board ultimately votes, at least 4 members vote to approve item A, no building is being closed, nothing like that. This is just really asking if we want to move forward, considering with plan, what we've been talking about is plan 2, but we want to be very specific now, okay? So there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of feedback, and we have gotten feedback, and Mr. Jacobs was definitely one of them, and I thank him for that, for leading some discussions about which elementary schools we would need to consider to keep open. So to be very specific right now, what we're talking about with the facilities plan is the 7 to 12 facility at the current GHS site, the 5th and 6th grade siting at Lombard, and then keeping open 3 K4 buildings, which would be Silas, Willard, Steele, and King. We've been talking about Nielsen and King rather interchangeably, but now we're saying, no, it's King, not Nielsen, that we would keep open. So a lot of the discussion that's gone on is people seeking more information. So what we've been saying in these community meetings is it's very time consuming to try to get all the information out there on every plan. So what we have tonight is detailed information on this plan, okay? And so we have, first of all, and Allison, can you pull up the operational costs? One of the questions that we were tasked with trying to get a really good answer on is, would there be operational cost increases, decreases, what? And of course, a lot of this is projection. And based on what we believe the cost of things will be in 2021 and 22. And there's a lot of logic behind a lot of these numbers, but at the end of the day, if we're talking about closing Churchill, closing Gale, closing Nielsen, and adding on to Steele, adding on to, Steele, adding on to King, keeping Silas Willard as it is, a minor addition to Lombard, and then the rehab of the GHS facility. Our projected annual operational savings in year 1, at least, would be $1,167,188. That's primarily attributed to personnel reductions in custodial, food service, administration, and secretarial. The benefit of this plan for that reduction is that we have planned retirements coming up, and we don't believe We believe there's a path forward where no one would have to lose their job, that it would be done through attrition. So we believe that there's a way to do this through attrition. We believe almost entirely, if not entirely. So that's a good thing. We wouldn't be telling somebody they lost their job. It would just be absorbing some retirements as we move from one plan to the next.
If anyone can't see they want to, feel free to move up closer, please.
Can I talk about the assumptions that went into
Absolutely.
these numbers? Okay, great. So if you're looking at the top of this spreadsheet, which I realize there's a lot of numbers in here, but it took a lot to get all of this information. I kind of want to break it down into categories. So you see in the first section of the top operational costs for this year, we have gas, electric, and geothermal. These numbers are based on our 2017-18 numbers because we had a full year to look at. So that's based on last year's gas usage, electric usage, and geothermal usage in all of our buildings. We took this year's custodial salaries, food service salary, admin salaries, and secretarial salaries, as well as LPNs and library paras to get these numbers. So these are actually 2018-19 salaries. And then this year's costs for copier leases, a look back at our phone and internet service costs, and then this year's property and casualty. So we come up with a total for this year's operational cost to be $6,266,295. Since this project would take 2 years, 2.5 years to complete from tonight, basically, I wanted to factor in CPI so we kind of knew where we were going to be at in 2.5 years. So if you take the 2007
CPI being
Consumer Price Index.
Thank you.
So if you take the 2017 CPI, which was 2.5%, and you multiply the $6,266,295 over an increase of CPI at 2.5% over 2 years, you have us spending $6,583,526 by the year 2021-2022. So then at the bottom, Allison, if you can scroll down, I took the new configuration of schools. How I based the utilities for GHS and King was I used the assumption that we would have similar types of HVAC systems in those buildings as we had in Silas Willard. So I took the Silas gas and the Silas electric, broke it down by square footage, and then multiplied it by the anticipated new square footage of each of those buildings. So I feel it should be a pretty close assumption on that. Lombard and Seal will need to have expanded geothermal wells. So I did the same thing with their anticipated square footage, just took what their usage had been and multiplied it times the new square footage. I also built in 3% increases for the remaining staff that we're projecting for these areas. So that takes that into account. So we're looking at a projected operational cost in 2021, 2022 of $5,370,510. And that, as Dr. Asplund said, is a projected annual operational savings of $1,167,188. So those are very conservative assumptions based on our current utilities. There may be some additional efficiencies that we would be able to see, but I've sat down with Pam Weber, Director of Food Services. We feel those are accurate numbers, accurate hours for food service. In terms of our copy lease, we actually estimated a little high for these services and also for property and casualty. So we anticipate that we may see more, but once again, just like with our bond repayment schedule that we talked about earlier, we wanted to be conservative in what our annual savings would be between the buildings.
So you also have the average per square foot.
Yes.
And you're projecting for 2 years from now, it'll be $8.14.
Correct.
And then under this projected, it goes down to $6.85?
Correct.
Because we have a lot less square feet?
No, because of the efficiencies of the buildings, because you have less personnel, you have fewer utilities, it's more efficient systems than we're currently running. So that's where this per square foot costs. This also takes into account the additional transportation required with the new configuration of buildings. So Mrs. Earp, our transportation director, factored in that we would need 5 additional routes to run with the 3 K4s, 5, 6 at Lombard, and 7, 12 at the high school. When you take into account the 80% reimbursement for transportation through the state, which we are receiving that, it would have an annual increase in our transportation of $48,828 based on this year's contract with First Student. So we are in the process of going out to bid for transportation services. So those assumptions will change once we have those bids in, and we determine moving forward what we're going to do with transportation. But I did subtract that number out of the operational savings, so that's accounted for in there.
All right, thank you.
And this is an annual savings?
This is an annual savings.
A conservative annual savings of over $1 million per
Yes,
year?
per year.
Any other questions, comments?
Okay, so I do have.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, absolutely.
So I see the footprint of the 712 building to be 108,000 square feet more than the current building at GHS. And that's based on, do we have, is that based on the number of students multiplied out?
So
How
that's
does that
based
work?
on estimates from Leggett that we received on additional classrooms that would need to be constructed and additional areas that we would need to reclaim. So,
But some of the reclaimed space is already in the 342,000 though, right?
correct. But these would be additional, at this point, that we're estimating additional square footage. But that's still, and we're kind of a long way from finalizing floor plans and layouts, but at this point, it's our estimate, and we wanted to estimate high. Same way with Lombard. So we're going from roughly 93,000 square feet to 106,000 square feet with the addition of Lombard. But there's still some questions of, whether we would need a 2-story addition, part of the new food service area, or whether we only need a 1-story. So those are things that, once the board determines if they're going to move forward with a plan, that we can begin working with those specific things with the architects. But it should not be any larger than what we're estimating.
Okay, thank you.
One other thing that I want to make sure everybody knows, we tried very hard to get a number for if we moved the vocational off-site, what that rent cost would be, and so I want you to be clear, that's not included here because we don't have a solid number on that yet. So we'd have to subtract that number from this, because we just don't have a number yet, if that was the path we had to go. So I want you to be aware of that. And then on the transportation side, we also then looked at, and Allison, can you pull up this map? Now understand, first of all, this map is exaggeratedly drawn because our district isn't as big as what the picture says.
Shanghai City?
Yeah.
I didn't know we had a place called Shanghai City.
Yeah.
But a big
It's not that far
building
from your
for
house.
us?
No.
This is real far from my house.
No, if you get over by Monmouth, you got Utah, Panema, Larchland, Gerlaw, I mean, there's all sorts of places. But this, once again, the district isn't this big, but this is not what we're saying the population or where the boundaries would be, but we're just showing how we'd have to redo the boundaries. So for instance.
That's the current one on the screen.
That's the current one right now, right. So if we go to the the colors right now, that blue is Gale, the red, I'm kind of colorblind.
The tan.
The tan is Silas Willard.
No, the tan is steel.
Whatever that is over there.
The center is brown,
The
that's
bottom left
Silas.
is steel.
Red is Nielsen, and then aqua is King.
Right. So on the second one, you can see the top color is steel, the bottom color is King, and the right color is Silas Willard. Correct? Yeah. So this is not, and this is based on today's population. So people have asked the question where the boundary is going to be drawn. We don't know. We're just showing you based on today's population, trying to even out free and reduced lunch counts and trying to get those enrollments leveled out. This is one way to look at it for today. We know that there are issues with this, so But the question was asked, so we wanted to make sure we tried to show you an effort of how that could be done, all right? This is, and once again, our population moves about, 17% of our population moves, you know, a year. So we cannot draw what we think it's going to be 2 years from now. We're showing you based on today's numbers.
And one of the challenges with our map is, if you see where, on the bottom map, where
Can you
King,
enlarge just the bottom?
yeah, where King, Nielsen, I'm sorry, King, Silas, and Steele all intersect, that is an incredibly dense population in that area there. So it looks like, you know, area-wise, Steele is much larger, but it has to do with the concentrations of our population.
And most of those bus students are either going to Gale or Steele currently, those country routes.
Yes.
Depending. I mean, if you live down south, you go to King.
But up to the north.
Right, I meant
there-
the
yeah.
The north, yes, they go to Gale and to Silas, or Steele, sorry.
And in regards to transportation, currently, because one of the feedback that we have gotten is the length of time students are going to be on buses, correct? But currently, those on the outer rims of our district are on a bus, average time of?
There was, and like it was an hour and 10 minutes, I think, was the longest route.
Yeah, I saw kids get
And that's
picked up
current.
today or
It's
earlier.
current. Mhm.
Yeah, that's now.
That's what it is.
That's why the 5 buses would be added up.
Right. Okay. Well, the reason I asked that question is because one of the complaints has been our students are going to be on a bus all day. And my point being that there's already students on bus rides for a pretty long time because of where they're located in regards to their neighborhood school. Okay. And those students, correct me if I'm wrong, are already on routes with students that are older and younger than them because of location and because of timing of school bells?
Most routes are grades 6 through 12 and then K through 5. Going home, we do have a couple routes that are K-12 going home.
Okay. I think that's a misconception in our community that that's not already occurring in some capacity, and I think that there was some concern that this would be a new thing for some of our students. In reality, it is current practice for some of our students.
Yeah, Nielsen and King, both, 2 of their buses ride with the junior high and high school students.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments regarding this agenda item? How are board members feeling about voting?
Can we go over the tax assumptions?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay, can you pull that up? So there's been a lot of conversation about what this is going to do to the tax rate. So I've prepared some tax assumptions, looking at a total $52 million bond issuance with 0.5% a year annual growth in EAV, level funding from the state, and no pension cost shift. So that's important to take into consideration as well. This year, we're gonna see $1.06 that would be needed in order to make the bond payment. We were able to take 50 cents of the building fund down to 0.257, fire prevention from 5 cents to 0, and working cash from 5 cents to 0, to, in essence, work the new bond payment into the existing tax rate. So the board last year approved a 495 tax rate. We are still at a 495 tax rate. There might be some questions about, well, if you take fire prevention safety down to 0 and you're reducing what you're levying in the building fund, how are you going to pay for future repairs? We do have some additional revenue from our 1 cent sales tax that we have been keeping in Fund 60 that we anticipate that will continue, and we'll continue to build those reserves. So after we get the health, life, safety work done and any additional work that we decide to do to the buildings, we will use that reserve that will build up over time to maintain the buildings and make any repairs or improvements that we need to from that point. And then in year 2, when the tax rate, which is levy year 2019, goes to $1.21, we'll keep the rates that we're recommending this year the same. And then the intention is to lower the tort rate 15 cents from 48 cents to 33, because we will be seeing some additional efficiencies that are currently built into the tort fund right now, with reduced costs in custodial, reduced cost in property and casualty insurance, things of that nature. So we'll be able to see some additional efficiencies, and so we're gonna bring that portion of the levy down to once again be able to keep the tax rate level of where it's at $4.95, given that all the assumptions I listed above hold true.
Other questions?
So bottom line, we can do this without a tax increase for the homeowners.
Correct.
You're gonna say it?
Borrowed money was paid.
I'll comment on it later.
Okay.
And what happens with the $1.1 million in operational savings? Do we just, we can invest that into schools differently, or any thoughts? Or?
Well, part of that's gonna come from the reduction in the levy of other funds, because we're gonna need to offset what we would be getting in revenue otherwise. So that savings is helping to pay for a reduction in the other parts of our levy to help fit the bonds in so that there's not a tax rate increase. Does that make sense?
No.
Okay, so let's take a real easy one to
Thank
start
you.
with. We'll start with that one. Health, life, safety, okay? Currently, we levy a nickel of rate, so that's applied to the value of your home, and then that's, you know, results in, yeah. But that is an important part of this, so you levy in dollars. So we can take what we currently levy for health, life, safety, and essentially wipe that out. And take that 5 cents and not levy it anymore, because we're taking, you know, Kevin talked earlier about $40 million worth of work in health, life, safety, so we're not gonna need that other money to pay for health, life, safety fixes. Now, for anybody who's saying, well, wait a minute, what if something happens? That's where we're talking about, when Jennifer talked about the 1 cent sales tax money, there'll be a pool of money in what we call Fund 60, which is the building fund, construction fund, to make those repairs. So you take that 5 cents and you just wipe that out. So that's revenue we have been getting that we would no longer get, because we're saying we're already fixing the problem and we have another source of revenue to fix that problem. In tort liability, we would be reducing that tax rate because we would have less exposure in liability through these building adjustments. So we can lower our tax rate because we don't need the same dollars to pay for costs that no longer exist. We would then also reduce some in, for now, I mean, things happen down the way, we have to adjust it differently, but for now in things like working cash or in operation and maintenance and those places where we can find some other efficiencies. So we're going to take in less operating revenue because we don't have as much operating expense, and that reduction in levy dollars is where we find the availability to fit these bonds in so that we're not asking for an increased tax rate. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
And so, for instance, this year we're taking our operations and maintenance, which is listed as building, on our levy from last year at 2.1 million down to 1.1 million. So these operational savings that we're going to see will help to offset some of that reduction that we won't be receiving through the levy as well.
Other comments? I'm going to take an opportunity to share some of my thoughts at this point. I think in an attempt for sound bites and news cycles that attract readers and catch our short attention spans, some key things have been focused on that have been misleading. While we have mentioned that our feedback has been not as large as we thought it could be, it does not mean that we have not received feedback. We have. We've received it from teachers, we've received it from parents, we've received it from retired educators, we've received it from parents and taxpayers alike. Whether it's via email, phone call, stops in the store, etc. So that would be the first misconception that I'd like to straighten out. Second, it's also been shared that we are moving too fast or that this hasn't been given the time required. I am almost at the end of my 4-year term, and I have been having conversations about building studies since the day I stepped onto the board. We've talked about enrollment, we've talked about costs, we've talked about all kinds of things, which is why the decisions were made within the first year and a half that I sat on this board about budget reductions. You could say it was an effort of steps to understand what it is and where we are at given our enrollment, what it is that we needed to get our budget in line with what our enrollment is. Former Superintendent Grimm used to call it right sizing. We've now right-sized our district regarding staff, and now we have to right-size it with our buildings. And that was always the intention since the time that I've been on this board. This is the second building study that I have been through as a board member. We held 13 community meetings after Dr. Asplund joined us to gain feedback. And I will say, and correct me if I'm wrong, the majority of that feedback actually came from members of our GEA. Looking back on those 13 meetings, I would say the GEA was probably the most represented contingency of our community at those meetings. All asking for smaller class sizes and climate control. We just negotiated a contract. We have smaller classrooms for the coming years, correct?
For next year, smaller class sizes.
And so now the next tackle is climate control. I've sat here at this table and said on numerous occasions that one of my roles as a board member, along with the other 6 that are sitting up here with me, is to respond to our student needs, understanding what the staff need in order to do that, and being responsible to our taxpayer in doing so. Now, the decisions that I made a couple of years ago to reduce staff were extremely difficult to do. But we saw the evidence of those decisions in the fact that we had a budget in the black this year. Now, we had some help from the state finally, because they rewrote our funding formula, thankfully. But now we have to answer the questions about our enrollment, about our building use efficacy. And so that's what we're being called to do, but it has not been something that is done within the last 3 months. Now, I cannot address nor can I explain why the community only chooses to pay attention at certain key times in our decisions up here. You know what? I was a community member at one point, and I have to say I was guilty of the same thing. So that was the other misconception that I wanted to address while I was sitting here tonight. Any other thoughts or comments?
Yeah, John, I'd like to piggyback exactly on what you said on a couple points, because the same things were going through my mind. When I got up and into this chair 3.5 years ago, I began, as well as you did and other people, talking about several goals. And we did use a while back, you know, the goal of right sizing. And as Tiana said, we've been having discussions about reorganizing and right-sizing our facilities and physical plant operation expenses. Like I said, I've been up here for 3.5 years. At least for 3 of those years, I've been having those discussions. I remember early on, Jean Ann and I went to the high school specifically just to meet with teachers. And one of the more lively parts of the discussion was exactly on these issues, on how we reorganize our buildings and our delivery of education when it comes to facilities. And that was about 2.5, 3 years ago. So this is nothing new. It's not something that Dr. Asplund came to us 60 days ago and said, I'd like to ram this through, will you help me? You know, these discussions were started before Dr. Asplund was even here. As I said on several of the forums we had, you know, I've come through different ideas over the last 3 years on what I would like to see. I do have a wish list that would be different than the plan we're probably going to proceed with. But I've joked before, I talked to the architects, I've talked to Jen, and unless someone is going to hand me $70 million I can spend, I'm not going to get my dream wish list for District 205. I am trying to make the best decision for our students that I can with the resources I have available. I said to several of the forums that this whole concept of a 7 through 12 high school was new to me until it started being brought up in our discussions. And so, as I said again at the forums, and anyone out here can do it, all you have to do is go to that wonderful Google and Google 7 through 12 high schools. You can Google advantages, you can Google disadvantages of 7 through 12 high schools. You'll come up with numerous studies, numerous other school districts who have tackled this exact same question, who have hired researchers, who have done meta-analysis of the different studies. And I happen to have one of those meta-analysis in front of me where a school district looked at a variety of studies, and the researcher who did this for them, and Jim, ties right into something I think you were kind of saying earlier, and I agree with everything you said, wholeheartedly. The bottom line of this study was effective programs and practices, not grade configuration, determine the quality of schools. And that was because you can find a lot of studies that say this and that, although I will tell you the majority of studies I've had the opportunity to read, and I've read more of them than I wanted to, came down with it is a matter of choice. There are as many advantages as there are disadvantages. The majority of studies tend to say there are more advantages than disadvantages. I mean, I've got one right here in front of me that says, this one happened to be a Canadian study. The school districts in this study in Canada that switched to a 7 through 12 saw increased test scoring in math and literacy. And like I said, you can go on, and this study lists ton of other studies. There's a huge study that was done by the Tulsa School District. There's a study that was done by the Cincinnati School District. Both of those large school districts moved to 7 through 12. I found one study with an interesting history of school configuration in the United States, talking about how when our grandparents were going to school, it was K through 12, even in the larger cities. It was K through 12 in Galesburg when it started. Then there was the thinking that we should go with K through 8, 9 through 12. Then there was the thinking we should go K through 9, 10 through 12. Then there was the middle school concept that came along. And then we started shifting back away from the 9 through 12. It seems to be cyclical. The bottom line of a lot of these studies is a lot of it also seems to be financially driven on what districts can afford to do. But again, Jim, your comments I agree with. And I also want to come back to what Tiana said, and something I've been saying every time I meet with Dr. Asplin and Jen and talking to other people about this. We tried to do this big community outreach last year, and when I make a list of all the things that people said they wanted us to concentrate on and move towards, the way we seem to be going reaches or moves towards almost every single goal that everybody listed for our school district, except for having a school in every neighborhood. But all the other goals they told us about, including the ones Tiana mentioned, that we heard from educators. Give us more modern classrooms, give us climate control, get us away from asbestos and mold. We all should be able to teach in buildings like Silas Willard. We need more modern language labs. We need more modern this, that, and the other thing. We need to be able to offer our students more opportunities in certain things. The plan we're considering is an attempt to meet all of those requests and goals. And unfortunately, we as a school board can't hand 100% of the people everything they want. We just can't. It would be nice if we could, but the age-old adage is you can't please all the people all the time. And we know we're not going to please everybody. Again, unless you want to give us $70 or $100 million. And then maybe we could build a modern school in every neighborhood. But from top to bottom, from K through 12, I think the option we're considering is the best option to offer the best opportunities to all the students. Will it inconvenience some parents? Yeah, it might. Will it rub a couple educators the wrong way? Yeah, it might. But in my heart, and I think all around this L-shaped table, every one of us believes that we are making a decision to provide the best opportunities to the students. And I'll stop talking now.
Any other comments?
I'll go next. I'd like to address a couple of things. The comment that we're going too fast, which has been one that I've, as well as everyone else, have heard a lot. If you go back to 2011 with the Operation Rebuild, that started then to look at trying to make some improvements in our school buildings, climate, and so forth. And we all know the story how instead of going through every single one of the school buildings and doing those first, it got switched around and we had the field house. And it's a great facility and it's used every day, but our classrooms and our schools are used for 100% of our students every single day. And right now it's not equal. And I would like to see as much as possible, the buildings be equal in climate and facilities, so that the environment that the students are learning in is not based upon their address, but just by the fact that they are a student here, they will have the same opportunity or the same to work in, and our staff will have to work in, and our students will have to study in and to do their job, which is to be a student. It bothers me that the other assumption is that, perhaps we have ulterior motives, or we have a game plan, or we've decided this from the very beginning. If anybody's paid attention to some of the votes that I've taken here over the last 3.5 years, you'll know that I don't go lock and step with everything that the superintendent has wanted. The budget issues throughout the years has been an example of that. But for this, I'm looking at what is best for the most students, and I'm looking at the ability to move us forward, and the opportunity is here to do that. I have confidence in our staff. I have a great deal of confidence in our staff and our teachers that they will be able to do this, and they will do what they always do. They do a fantastic job. I mean, my kids had a great education here, and my grandchildren are having a great education here, and as they move through the system and move through the various schools, I fully expect that to continue. You talk about the buildings not being that important, but I often feel like that is what is so important, and it's not always what is going on inside the buildings, because there is such an affinity and such a need to hang on to certain buildings in the district. I know that was that way with Silas, and I didn't want to have to move from Silas, which is a very historical building, into a brand new building. And I'm very thankful that Lombard was renovated. But I have difficulty understanding this need to hold on to the building. It is not, Jim is right, it is not the building. But my purpose is to make as equitable an environment for students as possible throughout the district, and to give them a better environment than an environment not and I'm not talking 21st century in just the high school. I've never felt it's that way. I felt it's throughout K through 12 that we're looking at trying to improve things through K through 12. But to think that I haven't thought about this, or that I haven't studied it, or that I've just made a decision based upon someone else has told me to do, that's not the way I've ever done any of my decisions. And that's not the way I've come to this decision either. I will say most of the parents of students who are in the elementary grades have less of a problem with this than those who are currently in the upper grades. And those are the students it will affect the most, obviously, because they'll be going through the system. So it hasn't been a quick decision. As everyone says, we have talked about this since I've been on the board, and it has been talked since 2011. And unfortunately, because of the budget crisis and everything, and we had to put that aside and stop. But we now have the opportunity, with the way things are going, to decide whether or not we're going to invest a lot of money in all the current buildings and leave everything the way it is, and not have any improvements, any material improvements in those buildings other than life safety. And I think we need to be judicious with our money and spend it well, and we need to move to something like this in order to do that.
Well, I guess I'll make some comments. I think all the other members have pretty much echoed many of my sentiments as well. This hasn't been an easy process, but it has been a process. It's not a decision I don't think any of us have made, immediately. So much of it was listening to people, talking to people, doing some research, gathering data, and putting that all together to make a decision, you know, and this is kind of where it's leading to. For me, I looked at 3 simple things to help guide me in this decision-making process. One of the most important things for me was I saw inequity within the district. Students at Silas Willard being educated in a brand new, you know, climate-controlled 21st century building, while there's other students in other buildings that don't have the air conditioning, that have mold issues and buckled carpeting and, you know, older furniture. And I didn't see that as being fair. When it's 100 degrees, the students in the unair-conditioned buildings are not getting the same education as the students at Silas Willard or the air-conditioned buildings. And so that is really a driving factor in my decision-making, is making sure that all students are getting the opportunities to be educated in the same way. And another factor that kind of drives my decision-making process is I just don't want things to be equal. I want them to be better. You know, I think we should have a goal of making things better than they are, you know, the day before. And I saw some things as far as graduation rates, dropout rates, test scores, things that I think we can improve upon. I don't know if this is necessarily the answer, but it's potentially an answer. Some of the data supports that. And I think if we provide the 21st century learning opportunities, that could help improve these graduation rates and the test scores. So I look forward to that. It's already been mentioned, some of the increased learning opportunities. You know, for the 7 through 12, the potential to take advanced classes, or, you know, maybe having a foreign language at a younger age, or, you know, marching band at a younger age. You know, and those are just a few things that come off the top of my head. I'm sure as the educators start working, they're going to come up with all kinds of great ideas, you know, be able to work together. And I'm pretty excited about that. The ability to have counselors follow you through, you know, half of your educational experience in 205. You know, I think that's, you know, that will help to achieve these goals of making things better and, you know, improving our graduation rates and test rates. And then, you know, finally, another factor that kind of drives my decision making is being fiscally prudent. We're responsible to the taxpayers, and I was real pleased to see that we can do this and equalize our district and make things better as a learning environment, all while maintaining our current, you know, tax rate. You know, I've heard many, you know, some of the people I've talked to have told me, it's like, you know, I'm not concerned about the tax rate. You can raise our tax rate. We need a better educational system. Well, I don't, you know, I'm not quick to advocate raising taxes. If we can make things better at our tax rate we have now, I think I'm pretty satisfied. And I'm also satisfied with the fact that we have a diverse representation on the board here with different backgrounds and experiences, and I think we are kind of coming together with a similar consensus on much of this. So that also reaffirms some of my decision making. And another issue that has come to issue is with the 712 building is the safety of the students in the 712. I personally believe that if we build the facility properly and staff it properly, we can overcome those obstacles. If during this process we don't build the building properly and we make, you know, safety cuts and eliminate positions so that we're not properly staffed, then that might be an issue. But I've been in many places that, you know, like baseball stadiums hold 40,000 plus people, and from all different ages, and I've felt safe. And I believe much of that is because of the way they design the place and the way they staff them with the right people. So I have a lot of faith in our students and our staff if we present them with these situations, that they can do incredible things. And that's about it. Thank you.
I have something. Go.
Okay. I don't, okay. It's hard not to say it again, but I'm gonna say it again, that this was not something that we just stumbled upon this year. I, like everyone up here, will say it again, that from day one, I was so anxious and excited to see what the potential was that we could do changes within the district to make better buildings for all our students. I am beyond blessed that my children attended the building they did, and still currently do. And I mean, that point is driven home to me over the last 2 years when I would visit buildings and see the tape on the floor and see the windows without blinds. I mean, you're gonna talk about a safety issue. I mean, there's no blinds on the window. You know, can go on and on about that. But I'm, you know, I'm just say it. It's not a decision that we've just stumbled upon. And I'm going to address something that I've been implored to do, which is actually, and I mean, maybe you shouldn't even say it, but just to get out there that we need to look at options of keeping certain buildings open. I've spent countless times calling this office, calling Dr. Asplin and talking with him and having conversations with Mrs. Ham about other options, about the note slipped at the board, you know, all these things about different options about keeping certain buildings open, and the numbers don't work. If we want to have a building for all students in every part of this town to go to that is up to date, I'm not even going to say super advanced and the best building in the state of Illinois, because you know, we're just trying to get to a level where we can have students that experience the best they can in this district. I know no one's gonna, you know, we've been told over and over again that we're not gonna make everybody happy, but I believe that my purpose sitting here is to make things the best they can be for all students, and I believe that this is something that we're taking a chance on, and we can do studies, we can read, we can Google it all, but until we actually put it in action and see it in our district and see how we adapt, we're not gonna know exactly what's going to come out of this as far as being positive or negative, but I'm willing to put it out there that I support, you know, taking this and again making it so that hopefully every student gets to have the best experience and the best education that they can in our school district.
I did a little homework this afternoon. You may remember that a few years ago there was a different building study. I reviewed that. Someone said, why don't you just use the old one? And when that came out, I wasn't sitting on the board, and I did go through it, and my response to them was, this is a bunch of junk. And I reviewed it again today, and I haven't changed my opinion on it. But some of the things that we need to be careful that we didn't do. I mean, I look at one here, option 5 then, was they put 1st through 4th grade at Nielsen and King, 5th and 6th at Willard, and 7th and 8th at Lombard. I mean, the thought much is much better now. They had all the 1st and 4th graders going to the east side of town. It was really a poor idea. And some of the ideas were revisited in some things that we saw, like having each school have a different grade, and that was left the table in this iteration as well early, because one of the things we have found by looking at what we do know about how kids learn is that they should stay in the same school for a few years. And that's one of the weaknesses of the proposal we have now, because at one level we had just 5th and 6th grade at one time. And we couldn't figure out some other way to make that work. So we just make sure that's the best place with the best programming, so kids can get an investment from the day they walk in the door. But you know, the plans that we have now are much better than the ones were presented 2 years ago. Not only more detailed, I think they're more responsive to what our community needs. And is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. But as Rod says, we just make sure it gets close to perfection when we start drawing walls and people bring us proposals saying, we need to get this better. You know, closing schools is nothing new in this district. I mean, I moved here in '85, and I missed the time in the '81 through '82 when you closed 11 schools one year and one more the next. I mean, there was a reason for that, because the community couldn't afford them all. And I think we're in a position to do that again. We can't afford them all. We're trying and maximize our resources in fewer buildings. That was the time when the middle schools became elementary schools, and we closed all these little tiny elementary schools. And we're talking about little larger schools. Will they necessitate having more problems? I sure hope not. We have staff, and we need to build the buildings so they don't. And maybe part of it is because they're going to be bright, cheery places. So people feel better about themselves all the time. I mean, this is nothing new to our community. The reasons we're looking to do it are consistent with the reasons the community has done in the past. And if we could use some of those operational savings, not just to lower the rate, but put it into the classroom for instruction, that'd be even better. And I think it's something we'll be looking at as the curriculum evolves over the time. So I think this is a positive in many ways. It forces us to look at what we're doing and how we can do things better.
Member Banks, did you have anything to add?
There's nothing else left to say. I think most things have been covered. A couple of things. I know it was mentioned that, well, it goes hand in hand with the belief that somehow we've had this all in the works for, I don't know, however long we planned it, and lack of transparency. One of the reasons that I ran for this position was because of my thinking there wasn't enough transparency on the board. And I've worked very hard to make sure that it is more transparent. You can now view it live or later if you can't make it here. And I think all of us are open. We all have the email. I respond to the email. I think everyone does, maybe some not as timely as others. I have a lot of time on my hands, so I'm usually pretty quick. Others have jobs and lives, so it may take them a little time to contact you. I'm not opposed to phone calls or anything like that, and I think all of us are approachable. The other thing that bothers me about the things one of the things that someone said was that we shouldn't be doing this so quickly, and we certainly should not be doing it without having floor plans and stuff available for everybody to see. I have a lot of faith in our staff and the teachers, and they're the one, they need to have their input before we go into precise floor plans and where things go and that kind of stuff. And I think probably if we had done it that way, we probably would have heard, you didn't even ask the teachers what they wanted, and that would have been legitimate. So I have a lot of faith in our staff, our teachers, administrators, and our students to work out the logistics of all of this. Change can be scary. We don't always like some of the changes that we see coming down the line. I can remember when they moved the 9th grade to the high school. Oh my Lord, I thought sure the 9th graders were all going to be eaten by the seniors or something. I don't know what I thought, but I just thought that was a horrible idea. I wasn't crazy about 7 through 12 at the high school initially until I did my own research, hours of looking at different studies and different things. I think you're right. You can find the research pretty much to support whatever you were looking at. But bottom line, again, I have enough faith in our community and in our teachers and in our students to know that we're going to be able to work through this and work it out, and it's going to be great. And it will be an efficient use of our resources while enhancing the learning environments for all of the students in the district. And I think that's the bottom line of what we've all been trying to work for. That's all.
started the comments off. Which I typically try not to do. Okay, so we've all shared our thoughts, which I hope share with those that are here in person and those that are watching, whether now or later, to know. Once again, you know, I would, as a sitting board member, can I just say that I would love it if one of these years I didn't have a decision like this and I just got to like talk about curriculum. That would be lovely. Okay. So, are we?
Always be something.
We've had a very large discussion. The motion is on the table. Dr. Esplin?
Thank you. I want to make sure, and it was brought up earlier, I don't know, Jim brought it up in the audience, and I had said it at the beginning of this process, that really this consider approval of facilities plan is almost a symbolic vote at this moment, because it's not closing any buildings. We still have a few steps that have to go through to actually move forward with the plan. So tonight, this is really just affirming that this is, we want to dive deeper into this plan, and as we go down this successive list here, there's other things that have to happen. And then there would have to be another meeting where other things are done, because the State Board of Education has to approve this plan before we could even do anything. So, you know, this is not, this is not a final vote. It can't be. So whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, it's just a thing. I mean, we're just procedurally right now, this is, you know, this is where we are. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that.
Okay.
So what does that mean for today?
Basically, there's a motion and a second to affirm moving forward with plan number 2, which we talked about, which was.
That was the motion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other comments? Allison?
Sherpy?
Aye.
Statham?
Aye.
Banks?
Aye.
Cervantes?
Aye.
Glasnovich?
Aye.
Lyon?
Yes.
Pickrell?
Aye.
Okay, moving forward to B, consider approval to sell $40,500,000 school fire prevention and safety bonds. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Questions? Allison?
Statham?
Aye.
Banks?
Aye.
Cervantes?
Aye.
Glasnovich?
Aye.
Lyon? Pickrell?
Aye.
Sherpy?
Aye.
Okay, next. Consider a resolution declaring the intent of the Board of Education to issue $12 million working cash fund bonds and directing that notice of such intent be published in the manner provided by law. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Wasn't, but I thought we were not selling them for a year.
So what this is doing is giving the district the authority to sell those bonds when the time is right. So it's a 3-year window. So we're just asking that authority, because there's a publishing requirement. So we're just asking to kick off that timing now, because we know within the next 3 years we're going to need to do it. So we're just asking.
Well, we can't sell it till we need it though, right? Isn't that
Well,
arbitrage?
you can sell it, you can hold on to, Kevin, you're right here, so I'm going to make sure I get the expert on this. I'm pretty confident. There's a window of time you have to show that you have a need for the money. And that the total length of time on that, is it 5 years?
No, the spend down is 3 years.
It's 3.
You have 3 years to spend the money for the project.
Right.
In the state, that's an IRS regulation.
Right, yeah, this is an IRS thing, so.
The state gives you 3 years to issue the bonds from when you initiate the process, but then you have 3 years after you issue the bonds to spend the money down.
Right.
And you have to kind of, the architects have to work with you to produce an estimated drawdown schedule that shows that you anticipate with reasonable good faith that you will. Not to say that something doesn't come up sometimes, that a steel shortage or something that could delay something beyond 3 years, but you have to have a reasonable expectation that you'll be able to spend it in 3 years.
Right, so the 3-year window gives the architects an opportunity to plan for when is the right time to sell those bonds based on where we are with construction. If we don't ever go out to sell them, then we'd have to come back later and get another authorization. But this is just giving us the timeline right now that to do that when we think the time is right.
Thank you for the clarification.
And based on the projections that I showed the board, we're looking at selling them probably in 2020, so.
Any other questions? Allison?
Banks?
Aye.
Cervantes?
Aye.
Glasnovich? Lyon?
Yes.
Pickrell?
Aye.
Sharpie?
Aye.
Statham?
Aye.
Next, consider approval of health, life, safety amendments. Ms. Ham?
The health, life, safety amendments that we're asking for your approval tonight are the additional items that Leggett Architectures and the engineering consultants that they worked with identified in the buildings, and so the board needs to approve those before we can submit them to the Regional Office of Education and to the Illinois State Board of Education.
And then that gives us the authority to spend the money from the $40,500,000 that we're issuing bonds for.
Correct.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Any questions about any of the items in that?
It's almost all mechanical.
It's mostly mechanical. Were there other?
No, it's primarily mechanical.
Primarily.
We had an engineer run walk through all the buildings, and they identified extra needs.
Can you walk through one more time?
No.
Allison?
Cervantes?
Aye.
Glasnovich?
Aye.
Lyon?
Yes.
Pickrell?
Aye.
Sharpie?
Aye.
Statham?
Aye.
Banks?
Aye. The enrollment report, are there any questions? I admit I did not have a lot of time to delve into this report. Are there any glaring, I see we have, is that a 64?
Is that a reduction of 64
Yeah, that's
students
a-
from
that's a-
last year?
That's a reduction, isn't that?
I think it's from 6th enrollment.
Right there.
Yes, from our 6th day
It's from our
Oh.
6th day enrollment from the beginning of the year.
Okay, do we have an
So we're down
idea?
64 students.
Yes.
Since the beginning of the year, yes.
Right, but on the second tab, are we down 200 from
From the previous
the
year.
previous year?
Yes.
Yes.
Do we have any ideas?
We don't at this time.
Do we, is there a plan to do like we did last year and figure out, okay. All right, moving on to focus area number 3, responding to the changing needs of our community. First, we have consider approval of the baseball spring trip. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Dr. Aspen?
Actually, Mr. Matthews, would you like to get up really quickly and just explain where the 2 trips are, since you're dealing with baseball and softball, so we have to get it at one time? Yeah.
He has it too.
Yep.
The baseball team is just going down to St. Louis for a tournament. It's not really leaving out of state, but they'll be spending the night. So they just wanted to make sure they got approval since they'll be spending the night in the hotel. And then baseball, or softball is looking at going to Myrtle Beach over spring break. They won't be missing any school time. They'll be leaving to go down and play Muhammad Seymour, and then just keep on going down to Myrtle Beach to play anywhere from 4 to 5 games and then come back.
And where did the funds come to pay for the trip?
They'll be raising the funds themselves. They've already had some informational meetings with the parents to talk about how those funds are going to be raised. It was something that the parents would like to do, and everybody was kind of on board. So, and this is new to me, but this is something that has happened in the past with the district. So, I thought it was okay to move forward. They put together a couple proposals, which you guys have. To answer any of those questions.
Any questions from board members?
In the softball trip, it says expenses include enterprise and hotels. Is Enterprise who puts this on? What
No,
is
that's
that?
just for travel.
Probably rental cars.
Oh, rental cars. Oh.
questions?
So we don't use our
Yes.
activity buses?
Yeah, we'll use one, but then there'll be other modes of transportation, yeah.
Thank you.
Is this the first time softball's done something like that, or? you know?
I think so, yeah, but I'm aware of it. I know baseball used to do some of that in the past, and that's kind of been toned down quite a bit, to use that money more in the summertime as opposed to taking it all in for one huge trip, to benefit more kids in the program.
Okay, so we'll vote on item A first. Allison?
Glasnovich?
Yes.
Lyon?
Yes.
Pickrell?
Aye.
Sharpie?
Aye.
Statham?
Aye.
Banks? Aye. Cervantes?
Aye. And then consider approval of the softball spring trip request. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any additional questions? Allison?
Lyon?
Yes.
Pickrell?
Aye.
Sharpie?
Aye.
Statham?
Aye.
Banks?
Aye.
Cervantes?
Aye.
Glasnovich?
Aye.
And next, consider approval of the tentative tax levy. Mrs. Ham?
Can you pull that up, Allison? So in front of everyone tonight, I have outlined kind of what our actual extension was for 2017, just as a reminder to the audience and to the board members that when we vote on the levy in December, we don't have the actual EAV in at that time. So we have to make educated assumptions based on data that we have from the county clerk's office to establish our levy. So on the spreadsheet that you have, and actually, it's this one. It looks like that. We have two different columns to the right. We're anticipating that our 2018 EAV will come in around $428 million. We have in the first column to the right is anticipated tax year extension. So that's what we are actually anticipating receiving once we get notification in April, the beginning of May. The columns to the right, which say tax year 2018 levy request, is what will actually go on the levy certificate. So because the EAV is not set at this time, we always ask for more on the levy request because the EAV may come in higher, and if we didn't ask for more, then we wouldn't capture that additional EAV. So at the end of the day, with what we're anticipating our extension, we have our total rate at $4.95, which is the rate that we've had for the previous two tax cycles. And then if our levy requests were to come in higher than anticipated, we saw an increase of 3% in the EAV, then our tax rate would actually lower to $4.92. But we're not anticipating that kind of an increase in our EAV based on the numbers that we're getting from the county clerks. So the column that you see on the right is actually what will be on the levy certificate that you're voting on in December if you approve this anticipated proposed levy. And then the column to the left of that is what we anticipate receiving when our tax revenues come in next spring.
Questions for Mrs. Ham?
So are we voting on something today to publish this or something? Or what?
You have to vote on the anticipated levy, just so that we know that this is the direction that the board wants to take when I bring back the levy certificate, because we have to have it filed by the end of December.
You have to file it by the last Tuesday in December. Why that date? I don't know, but that's what the law is.
Yeah, I don't know, something I want to make sure everybody's aware. So the rate 2 years ago was $4.95. The rate that was levied last year, you were levying dollars, but we anticipated a rate of $4.95. The EAV spiked, so the rate last year was actually $4.83. Okay, so if we went to what we're saying is a level levy and it stayed at $4.95, it would actually be a 12-cent increase. I just want to make sure everybody knows what we're talking about, okay? And people then say, what's a 12-cent increase? If it ends up that way, that's a $40 increase per every $100,000 of assessed valuation on a home. So we levied last year at this same amount. I just want you to be clear that we did the same thing we're talking about doing here. It's just last year the resultant rate was $4.83.
And there are 2 different stopgap times where you can adjust your levy. So the county clerk will come back and tell you what the EAV actually is, and then you can amend it. Depends on the year, but typically that goes into February. So that we can have a further discussion later if you're a little squeamish about what the rate may be. But we do need to levy in dollars based on what we predict the EAV is going to be for the following year.
Right, to follow from the point, I mean, we do levy in dollars, not in rate.
Correct.
And this proposed levy, who says the same, it's more dollars.
It is more dollars.
So,
It's 3 million more.
yeah, and, pardon me?
It's 3 million more than last year.
No.
$3,300,000. Because last year the EAV was, oh, I'm sorry.
No. You were making it sound worse than it is.
Sorry.
$3 million in
EAV
dollars.
was up 3.3 million, sorry.
Right. This levy is just under $350,000 more. And I make the same pitch every year. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that we understand we levy in dollars, not rate.
Right.
And this is a tax increase, which is the reason I'll vote no, just like I did last year probably.
You did.
But we have additional EAV on the books that we didn't have
I
last
don't
year.
care.
Yeah.
The person who gets his tax bill and opens it up this year, compares it to last year, it's higher. That's a tax increase. If I tell you that I'm going to charge you more per hour this year than I did last year, you're going to say your rates went up. And if I tell you, well, other things changed, you're going to say, no, your rate went up. So if people are going to get a bigger tax bill than they did last year, their taxes went up. And I just think, especially when we're looking at the savings we're talking about, and the financial improvements we've made, I'll vote no, because I don't think we should increase the levy, period. I think we should levy the exact same number of dollars we did last year.
And just so I'm clear, you don't care in what fund those are. You're just saying the aggregate levy.
Exactly. And I think we had that discussion last year. I don't care where we make the adjustments. I think there's a $348,000 adjustment we can make somewhere.
Okay, point of order, we just had a discussion without a motion.
I apologize.
That's all right. It's my fault.
No, it's mine.
So do I have a motion to consider?
So moved.
Second. Now we can talk about it, right, boss?
Well, any additional comments? It's a good thing.
And this
we're
vote is not
honest.
binding, just so everybody once again is aware of this. It's next month's vote that's really crucial.
Okay. If there's no further
So
discussion.
is Wayne's suggestion possible?
Anything's possible.
Well, anything's possible.
Yeah. Could we do it? Yeah, we could show you what a levy looked like that was levied in the same dollars.
It's kind of why we kick it around tonight.
Correct.
I mean, would it be the will of the board that you'd like us to bring back a level levy to show you what that looks like, and this same levy to compare so you know what you're considering?
Yes. Yes.
Even though Jen's gonna eat that in her glass.
Because we're gonna be deficit spending then next year, and so.
You knew I was gonna do this.
I know, no, I know.
Information is power. We can bring it back and everybody.
So I
can see what
just-
I thought ignorance is bliss.
Well.
Ignorance is bliss, information is power.
Okay.
Time is money.
And we have spent a lot of it.
She's salaried though.
Okay. So, if there's no other questions, conversation. Allison?
Pickrell.
Aye.
Sherby.
No.
Statham.
No.
Banks.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye.
Glasnovich. Aye. Lyon.
Yes.
Okay. Next, we have to appoint a delegate and alternate to the joint annual conference. I hope you have all thought about this long and hard. Dr. Aspen?
Thank you. So, yeah, we recommend, you don't have to vote for an alternate. We recommend that you appoint a delegate and an alternate, because something could happen to the delegate, then the alternate couldn't go. Or if there wasn't one named. So, last year, I believe Representative Lyon was there, correct? Were you not the delegate?
No, Amy.
Oh, it was Amy last year, I'm sorry.
Member Pickrell.
It was you talking about it. I apologize. So, last year was
You did a great
member.
job too.
But we did talk last year that whoever it was last year, we thought it should be shared and it should be somebody else.
Unless she wants to do it.
I'm just reminding you what the conversation was last year. It is the will of the board, whoever you want to nominate, if they wish to do it.
So first I'll ask those members that are attending the joint conference, do any of you have a particular yearning to fill this delegation role?
I have a yearning that Rod do it.
I second that.
I will do it.
To make you feel better, I'll be the alternate.
There you go.
So, Member Sherpy is agreeing.
I'll be absent, so.
A tummy ache.
Okay.
Somebody's gonna get food poisoning.
So Member Sherpy will be our delegate and Member Statham will be our alternate. Did the board have an opportunity to go over the resolutions committee? Are there any concerns with what has been recommended that we approve and do not approve?
That first one, that they had 3 things about arming teachers. They came to a compromise on one, and I'm not sure I'm comfortable with any of the 3.
I agree with you.
Okay.
And I think Rod probably has similar feelings.
Oh, not necessarily. I can kind of see some of their points, because some of these school districts are extremely rural, and the response time for law enforcement, and what they've added into it is training requirements. It doesn't necessarily just, encourage all teachers to be armed. It gives them the opportunity to achieve the correct training to do it. And it doesn't obligate any district to do it.
So for the gallery's benefit.
But I will support whatever the board's wishes are.
So for the gallery's benefit, every year at the joint conference, the Illinois Association of School Boards basically votes on their slate of agenda items for the year, and what we as a body agree to support in Springfield as items to consider. And 3 of the resolutions actually came from smaller districts than Galesburg. And they do not have the ability or the financial means to hire school safety officers as larger districts as ourselves do. And so they wrote a proposal to be able to have the option, based on school board vote in those smaller districts, to have teachers trained to fill that role in some capacity. And so we will be asked as a board to whether or not we agree with that vote and to vote to recommend that or not. Now, of course, we're not the only school board voting. There's hundreds there voting.
But every vote counts.
Correct.
Well, and Member Pickerel, how many people were in that ballroom last year for Member Sherpy's benefit?
A ton.
Yeah, I'd say
That's a lot,
400.
Yeah, there's packed like this, like this. Yeah.
There's about 400 people in there. And there's lively debates on some issues and other things.
So do the board members sitting at this table have any direction for Member Sherpy on that particular?
That was the one that they're recommending is number 2.
Correct, 2, because they're not recommending 1 or 3 simply because they are so similar to number 2. So they're recommending board support number 2. What is the sense among the board? Support or not support, so that Member Sherpy has
I already
some
shared my
indication.
opinion, that I don't think it's a good precedent to have armed people in schools.
But boards decide how to do things locally, and what Rod said does make, I wouldn't vote here for that, but I'm not concerned about a response time, and we have school safety officers, at least we do at high school. So I'm pretty much, local rule and local government, I think, in this case, wins out for me.
I agree, I wouldn't go for it here, but I don't think I have the right to tell another district. It needs to be the local district deciding what's best for them, I think.
Lori and I would agree on this one.
Put that in your calendar.
Support or not support? With what they said, with them.
Or with,
Yeah.
member state.
Yes, correct.
I have to agree, I am also with member Lyon, Statham, and Pickrell. So it appears that District 205 will be voting no on that one by a vote of 4 to 3.
I will support the district's wishes and reflect it to other districts.
Number 4, financing public education other. This is on energy savings, funding, and borrowing. Were there any concerns or questions that board had? So we're all in agreement, we support this one.
Gives
Okay. Any other thoughts
think-
on this side of
was
the
there
table?
one more?
Yes, there is.
Yes.
And then financing public education state, this is a position statement on charter school funding and making sure that there's a legislation that creates a new methodology for funding of state authorized charter schools that do not have a negative financial impact on the host district.
We vote twice on that one?
And basically, they are suggesting that we do adopt this resolution. Are there any considerations from board members that are in disagreement of that? Okay, all right. You good, Member Sherby?
Actually, go quick, it's only 3.
Yeah. You think? I was gonna say, it's gonna be a long debate on that number 2, so. Okay, thank you very much for,
So I get to argue for something that I'm opposed to?
Just be quiet.
or you just have to sit there and wait to raise your pad for the vote. It is a very interesting.
You raised pads, they don't,
Yes,
there's clickers?
no,
You
we
want
got
some training
paddles.
on that?
Yeah, I have no idea, but you got paddles, and there's like, it's a weird over-packed auction in some kind of way, because you got a ballot, and there's like people that go around and they count them. Okay. Now the next,
We
oh, wait.
need a motion to
Oh.
appoint delegate and alternate.
Oh, sorry. I didn't realize we were voting. Okay. Do I have a motion? To
Sure.
appoint member Sherby
And
as the
alternate-
delegate and member Statham as the alternate.
That was you?
Yes. I so
Second.
move.
I'll second.
Any other conversation or question? Allison?
Sherby?
You can vote no, it's gonna pass.
Well played.
Statham?
Aye.
Banks?
Aye.
Cervantes?
Aye.
Glasnovich?
Absolutely.
Lyon?
Definitely not.
Pickrell?
Aye.
Okay. Next. Appoint board team members to the differential/salary schedule committee. Dr. Esplin.
Thank you. So as part of our collective bargaining agreement with the GEA, there's some language in the contract that says no later than January 15th of 2019, 3 members from the board team and 4 members from the GEA team will commence study for the next negotiation, excuse me, for not only differential pay, but also salary schedules. And so the purpose is to do a lot of research of what other districts do and to discuss what we think we should do. And so we thought it would be a good idea to formally adopt a team. Now, originally we had recommended to have Jennifer Ham, Eric Matthews in a 3rd spot, but we are going to amend that tonight to say the only seated permanent member is Jennifer Ham. Eric, you don't get out of it, but we do want more board activity on this, so we wanted some more open seats for some opportunities. So the only permanent member of that committee will be Jennifer Ham, with the other 2 seats to be occupied by board and administrative team members, depending on the need of that individual committee that day.
And when's this supposed to commence?
No later than January 15th.
Coming up?
Do I have a motion to approve this iteration of board team members to this committee?
So moved. Second.
Any other questions from the board?
I'm glad we're moving forward on this, because as we approve differentials on the personnel issue, I look at these and they're just all over the place, and it needs to have some rhyme or reason.
Right, which was why it'll be important for Mr. Matthews to be at the table for some of those discussions, but I think also making sure that there's other representation at the table when required for the different elements of the differential and salary schedule. No further comments? Allison?
Statham?
Aye.
Banks?
Aye.
Cervantes?
Aye.
Passage? Lyon?
Yes.
Pickrell? Sherpy?
Aye.
Okay, consider approval of the code of conduct revisions. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Ms. Ham.
The revisions to the attendance policy are just to help mesh the Regional Office of Education's initiative to fight truancy in their two-county area. So there was some confusion because our language was off sometimes by a day or two in terms of when we were to submit letters. We are now kind of consolidating our efforts and sending out letters on behalf of the ROE for truancy so that we can move towards developing those interventions and getting the truancy officers involved more quickly than our previous policy did. So it's just kind of a nice mesh between our previous policy and the ROE's policy and kind of eliminating kind of double the work for our schools in essence.
I apologize that I didn't ask these questions earlier, but you know, in looking and also work overload, are the only differences in this timing, or are there sanctions that are different?
No, in the previous policy, there were still truancy tickets that were issued.
Okay.
But now the truancy ticket is going to be issued by the truancy officer. It won't be our personnel issuing the truancy tickets. So once it gets to that point, then they refer the parent, guardian, and or student to a countywide truancy board. The parents and the guardians and the student appear in front of that truancy board, and then if truancy continues, then that's when the Regional Office of Education and their truancy staff would get kind of the legal system involved once you've hit that 15th absence.
Well, and because this is really only a timing issue, we would like to take a little bit more of an extreme approach. We would like to approve this on one reading because we really need to get in line with what the ROE is working on, and if we're going to get our students on the same footing as all the students in the rest of the region. We're the only one that's not currently in the same ballpark, so it would really be to our students' benefit to be able to move this now so that we can start getting the support of the court system and getting students back in school.
Questions from the board?
For their entire region?
Correct.
So that's 5 counties or something?
3 counties, 4 counties.
4 counties.
So they haven't increased them since the consolidation of the ROE, because we had 2 before, I believe.
I know Lorenzo. I know the other one is new, but I'm not sure who the other truancy
I mean,
officer was.
before the ROE consolidated over in London, when they did away with the 2 separate ones, we had 2 in our ROE. So they increased the size, but they
Now,
not.
we only know of 2. Maybe there are 2 that go west that we aren't aware of, I mean, to be honest with you.
There's 2 that we work with.
We work with
Okay,
2.
yeah, that would be the same, so hopefully that's the case. Janine Harkness, right?
I'm sorry, what?
Janine?
Yes, and
Harkness.
Lorenzo.
Any other questions from board members?
I see no reason why we can't act tonight.
Yeah, it's really just dates. You know, that's all it is. It's not any.
How does this get
intent.
shared with parents then?
Well, right now, the ROE is, we are supposed to be sending out letters on behalf of the ROE, and then they do the tickets. That's kind of how we did the division labor. And notice would go out through those letters. And so actually,
That's not what I meant.
no, but I need you to understand, we can send home like an email blast or whatever, but they could get tickets now without really understanding what the regulations are. So this is actually
This
going to
isn't
be
our code of conduct? The old
Our
one?
code of conduct doesn't line up with what the ROE's expectations.
Right, I guess my question is, how do parents find out there's been a change in the code of conduct?
We will have to send them notification via email
Okay.
to let them know that there is a change.
We can also put a link on the front page of the district website. Where's Matt? I'm gonna volunteer Matt. If we could just put some kind of a banner that says change of code of conduct so that people could just link right to that piece of it after we send the Skyward Blast. Okay, thank you.
I didn't say that. It's true.
Any other questions? Allison?
Banks?
Aye.
Sorrento's?
Aye.
Glasnovich? Aye. Lyon?
Yes.
Pickrell?
Aye.
Sherpy?
Aye.
Statham?
Aye.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 10. Consider approval of job descriptions. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Dr. Asplund?
Thank you. You have a number of job description changes there. The only one that's really a new position is that one we discussed last month with the community relations person. We've tried to, we took from 2 different school districts and tried to pick out what we liked best about both of them, and we put together a new job description there. But other than that, the others are all existing positions that were either reflecting what they currently do or modifying based on upcoming retirements and things like that, to try to make sure they're all in line with what we have for their current job assignments.
Any questions? Sorry, I just want to check something in here. It's not being cooperative.
It crashed on me, the internet. Hang on, let me look.
Mhm.
If there are no questions?
I haven't gotten to the new one. I didn't do my homework on this, I'm sorry.
Well, this is, we would bring this back again next month, so if you want some more time to study it. This is the new position, I'd want you to look at it for a couple months. No, we would have to talk about that at some point. If we decide we want to go forward with them, I would come forward with some sort of survey and then give you some information about what I would recommend based off that survey. I didn't want to be presumptuous and get that far.
Any other questions?
I think the position's very needed.
Allison?
Cervantes?
Aye.
Glasnovich? Aye. Lyon?
Yes.
Pickrell? Aye. Sherpy?
Aye.
Statham?
Aye.
Banks?
Aye.
Okay, next, consider approval of the personnel report. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Questions?
This reflects our discussion.
Yes, the agenda discussion. Yep.
It does?
In closed session, yes.
Oh, I thought we had to, I thought we were.
Please take that off.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Allison?
Glasnovich?
Yes.
Lyon?
Yes.
Pickrell?
Aye.
Sherpy?
Aye.
Statham?
Aye.
Banks?
Aye.
Cervantes?
Aye. All right, and next, grievance update. Dr. Armstrong.
Thank you. So I responded to the union's grievance regarding the stipend for the success coordinators last week, waiting to hear back from them. And then we received another grievance, I believe on Friday. I was gone, regarding class size, and I need to respond to Dave within the next few days, which I plan to do. So we'll get that 5 days. So today's day 1. So yeah, I will get it to them. I'll be gone at the end of the week, so I'll make sure I get it back for them.
Finally, we've come to what will be perceived as the end of the meeting. Comments by members of the board. Member Glasnovich.
Attended and very much enjoyed the play, Almost Made. Excellent job, as always, and appreciate Mr. Ulrich and Mrs. Dillard's hard work on that. I know what it's like to put together a show. So, very well done.
Member Sherpy?
Yeah, no comments.
Member Pickrell?
I would just like to say, I know they're not here, but the high school's Veterans Day thing, I'm sorry I couldn't attend. Thank you for inviting us. Full-time job kind of prevails sometimes, but from what I saw on social media, that was a very well received effort, from everybody involved, so nice job.
Member Bates? Member Seaton?
No additional comments, thank you.
Member Lyon?
Well, I also had a chance to attend the play. I enjoyed it. I wish there were more of them at the high school. And I still wish we weren't charging as much to get in. I don't think it should cost more to go to a play than it costs to go to a football game. And my other comment is I'm glad to see there are trees around the Willard parking lot and behind the school. And I'm looking forward to the road.
Reduced cost, by the way.
Yeah. It has to.
Yeah.
Good going.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
They look like twigs right now, but I guarantee you they'll be beautiful in the spring.
I want to thank all of the individuals who have participated in the last several months and years in the work that we're doing around the building study and all of it. They're not easy conversations, and Member Banks said earlier, change is not easy when there seem to be uncertainties, and I can only say, and I don't know how to fix the past, and I know that some people say that we should take some accountability for previous board decisions, but I can only work with what I got, and I'm trying to do the best that I can given that circumstances. So I appreciate all the people who have attended the meetings, the community engagement meetings that we did last year, the forums that we hosted this year, the people who have taken the time to email us, to call us, to stop us in the grocery store. I appreciate people sharing their concerns, their ideas, their prospects with us. Okay. Any future agenda items from any board member? Okay. Our next meeting is set for Monday, December 10th at 7. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Allison?
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, sir.